The security guard barely glanced up from his clipboard. "Sir, civilian seating is in the back section only," he said, pointing toward the metal folding chairs arranged behind a rope barrier. "Military families get priority up front." The old man nodded quietly, adjusting his worn baseball cap as younger families brushed past him, their dress uniforms and crisp ceremonial ribbons catching the morning sunlight streaming through the gymnasium windows. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have military veterans in your family too. Franklin Kowalski had driven 3 hours to watch his grandson Marcus graduate from basic training, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel of his 15-year-old pickup truck as he navigated the base entrance earlier that morning. The MPs at the gate had processed his visitor pass with the same routine indifference, scanning his civilian identification and marking him as standard family attendance. No one asked about his service. No one looked beyond the faded flannel shirt and work boots that marked him as just another proud grandfather. The gymnasium buzzed with pre-ceremony activity as military families claimed the premium seating near the front. Colonel Patricia Hendricks observed the crowd from her position near the platform, her practiced eye cataloging the mix of active duty parents, retired officers displaying their service rings and unit pins, and the scattered civilians relegated to the rear section. Her attention lingered momentarily on the elderly man settling into a back row seat, his quiet demeanor contrasting sharply with the animated conversations surrounding him. A young Marine corporal approached the seating area, his dress blues immaculate as he addressed a cluster of military families. "Good morning, folks," he announced with practiced authority. "For those unfamiliar with military protocol, please remain seated during the presentation of colors and stand only when directed." His gaze swept across the civilian section dismissively. "We appreciate your patience as we honor our military traditions properly." Franklin overheard 2 women in the row ahead discussing their son's achievements. "My Robert already has his orders for Fort Campbell," one said, her voice carrying the pride of military understanding. "The 101st Airborne, just like his father." She gestured toward her husband, whose green beret pin gleamed on his suit lapel. "Military service runs deep in our family," she continued. "Some people just understand the calling." The second woman nodded knowingly. "It shows in how they carry themselves," she replied. "You can always tell the difference between military families and, well, the others." Her eyes drifted briefly toward the civilian section where Franklin sat motionless, his hands folded over a simple program. "They mean well, coming to support their grandchildren, but they don't really understand what this represents." A master sergeant moved through the crowd, checking seating arrangements with military precision. His attention focused on ensuring proper placement of distinguished guests and active duty personnel near the front, while civilian attendees remained appropriately positioned in the designated rear area. The social hierarchy of military ceremonies established itself naturally, separating those who belonged from those who simply attended. Marcus Kowalski stood in formation with his graduating class, his eyes scanning the crowd for his grandfather. He spotted the familiar figure in the back section, sitting alone among the other civilian families. Pride mixed with slight embarrassment as he wished his grandfather could sit closer could be recognized alongside the military families whose service earned them preferred seating. But Franklin had never served, Marcus believed, never worn the uniform that would grant him respect in gatherings like this. The commanding general entered the gymnasium, his presence immediately commanding attention from the assembled crowd. Military personnel straightened reflexively, while civilian attendees looked around uncertainly, unsure of proper protocol. Franklin remained still in his seat, his weathered face calm as conversations quieted and the formal ceremony prepared to begin. Around him, the clear division between military understanding and civilian observation became more pronounced with each passing moment. Staff Sergeant Torres noticed the elderly man sitting quietly in the civilian section as he made his final preparations. Another grandfather, he thought, probably never held anything more dangerous than a fishing rod. The contrast between the decorated military families and the simple civilian attendees always struck him during these ceremonies. Some people served their country, he reflected, while others simply lived in it. The gymnasium filled with anticipation as the ceremony approached its formal beginning. Franklin adjusted his position slightly, the movement causing his sleeve to shift and reveal just the edge of something dark beneath the fabric. But no one in the surrounding area paid attention to the quiet old man in the back row, their focus directed toward the platform where military tradition and protocol would soon unfold with ceremonial precision. The presentation of colors began with crisp military precision, but confusion rippled through the civilian section as attendees struggled with unfamiliar protocol. Franklin remained seated when others stood uncertainly, then rose smoothly when the proper moment arrived, his movements synchronized perfectly with military timing. A young Air Force captain noticed the old man's precise responses and frowned slightly, assuming coincidence rather than knowledge. Captain Morris approached the civilian seating area during a brief pause in ceremonies. "Folks," he announced with patient authority, "military customs can be confusing for those unfamiliar with proper protocol. When you hear retreat, that means remain seated until the music ends." His explanatory tone carried the subtle condescension of someone addressing uninformed observers. "We appreciate your cooperation in maintaining ceremony dignity." The woman who had spoken earlier about her son in the 101st Airborne turned to her husband with barely concealed amusement. "Look at them trying to figure out when to stand," she whispered, nodding toward the civilian section. "Remember our first military ceremony? At least we had your father to guide us through proper etiquette." She glanced at Franklin, who sat with practiced stillness. "Some people just wing it and hope for the best." A retired Navy commander seated in the military family section observed the crowd with professional interest. His experienced, "I noted the awkward civilian responses to military commands, the uncertain glances toward uniformed personnel for guidance, and the general unfamiliarity with ceremonial traditions." These family events always highlighted the gap between military culture and civilian understanding. He reflected, watching Franklin adjust his cap brim lower. Major Rebecca Santos coordinated seating adjustments as distinguished guests arrived later than expected. She approached the civilian section with clipboard efficiency. "Sir," she addressed Franklin directly, "we need these back rows for overflow military personnel. Could you move to the standing area along the wall?" Her tone remained professional, but carried the assumption that civilian comfort ranked secondary to military accommodation needs. Franklin gathered his simple jacket and moved without complaint to the designated standing area. Other displaced civilians grumbled quietly about the inconvenience, but he positioned himself along the gymnasium wall with the same quiet acceptance he had shown throughout the morning. His weathered hands clasped behind his back in a posture that somehow looked familiar, though none of the nearby military personnel paid enough attention to recognize the stance. Two Marine sergeants coordinated crowd control near the standing area, their conversation carrying clearly in the acoustically challenging space. "These family ceremonies get complicated with all the civilian attendants," one commented to his colleague. "Most of them mean well, but they don't understand military structure or proper respect for the process." His eyes swept across the standing civilians dismissively. "Different worlds, you know?" The commanding general took the podium as the formal program began, his voice carrying the authority of decades in uniform. "Today we recognize young Americans who have answered the call to serve," he declared, his words resonating through the gymnasium. "They join a brotherhood forged in sacrifice, dedication, and unwavering commitment to something greater than themselves." Military families in attendance understand this transformation because they have lived it. Marcus searched the crowd again for his grandfather, finally spotting him in the standing section along the wall. Disappointment flickered across the young Marine's face as he wished Franklin could experience the ceremony from a position of honor rather than being relegated to the periphery. If only his grandfather had served, Marcus thought, he would understand the pride and tradition surrounding this moment instead of observing from the outside. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes noticed the elderly man standing quietly against the wall during the most solemn portions of the ceremony. Something about the man's bearing caught his attention briefly, the way he held himself with unconscious precision that seemed oddly familiar. But the observation passed quickly as ceremonial demands required his focus on the graduating class and their immediate families seated in positions of honor. A group of military spouses near the standing area discussed the ceremony's significance with knowing familiarity. "Our children grow up understanding sacrifice and service," one explained to a newer military wife. "It becomes part of their identity from birth." She gestured subtly toward the civilian attendees. "Others have to learn these values as adults, if they learn them at all. The difference shows in moments like this." Franklin observed the proceedings with calm attention, his weathered face betraying no reaction to the subtle dismissals and assumptions surrounding him. His position along the wall provided a clear view of the graduating class, and his focus remained entirely on Marcus rather than the social dynamics playing out around him. The sleeve of his flannel shirt had shifted slightly during the move, revealing just another inch of dark ink beneath the fabric. Staff Sergeant Williams managed crowd flow near the standing section, ensuring proper sight lines for the ceremony participants. His routine glance across the civilian attendees paused momentarily on the quiet old man whose posture seemed somehow different from the other displaced family members. But the distinction registered only as a fleeting impression before duty called his attention back to more immediate responsibilities. The graduation ceremony continued with time-honored military tradition as Franklin stood witness from his assigned position along the wall. Around him, the clear social stratification of military life played out in seating arrangements, conversation topics, and subtle assumptions about who belonged in which category. The old man remained patient and observant, his true identity hidden beneath the simple appearance of just another proud grandfather attending a family milestone. The ceremony paused for a brief intermission, and military families began sharing stories of their service heritage with practiced pride. Colonel Hendricks moved through the crowd, engaging with distinguished guests and active duty personnel, while civilian attendees remained largely ignored in their designated areas. The social divide became more pronounced as conversations revealed deep military knowledge among some families and obvious unfamiliarity among others. A retired Air Force general approached the military family section, his chest displaying an impressive array of ribbons and decorations. "My grandson follows 4 generations of Air Force service," he announced to the gathering crowd. His great-grandfather flew with the Flying Tigers in World War II. "Military excellence runs in bloodlines," he declared confidently. "Some families understand duty, while others simply observe it from the outside." 2 active duty colonels engaged in animated discussion near Franklin's standing position, their voices carrying clearly in the acoustically challenging space. "The difference is obvious during these ceremonies," one explained to his colleague. "Military children grow up with discipline and purpose built into their character. Civilian kids have to learn these values from scratch, if they learn them at all." His dismissive glance swept across the standing area where Franklin waited quietly. Master Sergeant Rodriguez coordinated the intermission logistics while observing crowd interactions with professional interest. He noticed the clear separation between informed military discussions and the confused civilian conversations about basic ceremonial elements. The old man, standing against the wall, caught his attention briefly, not for any particular reason except that he seemed remarkably comfortable despite being displaced from proper seating. Franklin listened to the surrounding conversations without reaction, his weathered hands remaining clasped behind his back in the same unconsciously military posture. A group of military wives nearby discussed the challenges of explaining service life to civilian friends who could never truly understand the sacrifices involved. Their words carried the subtle superiority of insider knowledge, creating invisible barriers between those who belonged and those who merely attended. The commanding general's wife approached several military families during the intermission, her gracious manner reflecting years of experience in military social situations. She engaged warmly with officers' spouses and retired personnel, discussing deployments, duty stations, and shared experiences that created immediate bonds. Her polite acknowledgement of civilian attendees remained brief and superficial, the natural result of having little common ground for meaningful conversation. Captain Torres noticed movement in the standing section and approached to ensure proper crowd management. "Sir," he addressed Franklin with routine authority, "please maintain your position against the wall to keep walkways clear for military personnel. The intermission can get crowded with all the family interactions." His tone carried the patient instruction typically reserved for civilians unfamiliar with military facility protocols. A young Navy lieutenant shared stories with other junior officers about his family's naval heritage stretching back 3 generations. "Service becomes part of your DNA," he explained enthusiastically. "My father served on destroyers in the Pacific, and his father commanded a submarine in the Atlantic. When you grow up around real warriors, you understand what commitment means." His eyes swept dismissively toward the civilian section. Some people just don't have that foundation. The intermission conversations revealed layers of military hierarchy and social understanding that excluded civilian attendees from meaningful participation. Franklin observed these dynamics with calm detachment, his position along the wall providing a clear view of both the military-family interactions and the isolated civilian observers who struggled to find their place in the structured environment. Major Santos returned to coordinate seating adjustments for the ceremony's second half. "We'll need to expand the standing area for additional military personnel arriving late," she announced to the civilian attendees. "Your cooperation in maintaining proper positioning ensures our service members receive appropriate recognition." Her efficient manner assumed civilian compliance without question or complaint about continued displacement. A group of Marine families discussed their sons' achievements with obvious pride and detailed knowledge of military advancement opportunities. Combat experience separates the real Marines from the peacetime soldiers, one father declared with authority born from personal service. His son earned his place through actual deployment challenges, not just training exercises. He gestured toward the graduating class with proprietary pride. Military families understand what those ribbons actually represent. The retired Navy commander approached other veteran families, sharing sea stories and deployment experiences that created instant camaraderie among those who had served. Their conversations excluded civilian listeners naturally, filled with acronyms, unit designations, and operational references that required military background for comprehension. Franklin remained within earshot, but separate, his silence interpreted as the natural result of having nothing meaningful to contribute. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes supervised final preparation for the ceremony's continuation while noting the clear social stratification that had emerged during intermission. Military families clustered in animated discussions about service history and traditions, while civilian attendees waited quietly for instructions about proper protocol. The division seemed natural and appropriate given the different levels of understanding and investment in military culture. Staff Sergeant Williams made final adjustments to crowd positioning before the ceremony resumed. His practiced, "I ensured military families maintained their positions of honor, while civilian observers remained appropriately placed in secondary locations." The old man against the wall had not moved from his assigned position, displaying the kind of patient compliance expected from those grateful to attend such military occasions despite lacking personal service credentials. The intermission concluded with clear reinforcement of social hierarchy based on military experience and family heritage. Franklin's quiet presence in the standing area marked him definitively as an outsider to the military culture surrounding him, just another civilian grandfather whose attendance was tolerated rather than celebrated. The ceremony prepared to resume, with everyone positioned according to their perceived place in the military community structure. The ceremony resumed with the presentation of individual achievements, and military families leaned forward with obvious pride as their sons and daughters received recognition for various accomplishments. Franklin watched from his wall position as Marcus stepped forward to receive his marksmanship ribbon. The old man's weathered face showing quiet satisfaction while surrounded by more demonstrative family celebrations from the preferred seating areas. A distinguished colonel approached the military family section carrying a leather portfolio filled with commendation certificates. "Gentlemen," he announced with ceremonial gravity, "today we recognize not just individual achievement, but the continuation of family legacies built through generations of faithful service." His words resonated with obvious approval among the military families, while civilian attendees remained passive observers of traditions they could not fully comprehend. Two Marine majors engaged in professional discussion near Franklin's standing area, their conversation revealing detailed knowledge of training protocols and graduation standards. The physical fitness requirements alone eliminate most candidates, one explained authoritatively to his colleague. Mental toughness separates the real Marines from those who think they understand what service means. His dismissive glance toward civilian attendees suggested they fell into the latter category. Captain Morris returned to provide additional protocol guidance to the civilian section, his patient tone carrying obvious condescension. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the displaced attendees, "please remain silent during individual recognition moments to maintain proper ceremony dignity. Military customs require respectful attention from all observers, regardless of their familiarity with our traditions." His instruction assumed civilian ignorance of basic respectful behavior. The commanding general began individual graduate recognition, calling each name with practiced military authority, while families responded with varying levels of understanding about appropriate ceremony conduct. Military parents and spouses displayed immediate recognition of achievement significance, while civilian attendees applauded uncertainly, following cues from more informed observers about when and how to show proper appreciation. Franklin listened as Marcus Kowalski was called forward for special recognition in rifle qualification. The announcement stating his exceptional scores had earned him designation as the company's top marksman. Pride flickered across the old man's face as military personnel nodded approvingly at the achievement, though none connected the shooting excellence to any possible family heritage beyond natural talent and dedicated training effort. Master Sergeant Rodriguez observed the individual recognition process while noting family reactions throughout the gymnasium. Military families understood the specific significance of different awards and ribbons. Their responses calibrated to reflect appropriate pride levels for various achievements. Civilian attendees simply applauded politely for everything, their lack of discrimination revealing obvious unfamiliarity with military merit system complexities. A retired Army general shared observations with nearby military families about the graduating class quality. "These young Americans represent the finest of their generation," he declared with authoritative conviction. Military service attracts those with character, dedication, and willingness to sacrifice for something greater than personal comfort. His approving nod toward the military family section implied these qualities were hereditary rather than individually developed. The ceremony continued with additional recognition categories as Franklin maintained his quiet position against the wall, his unconscious military bearing becoming slightly more pronounced during moments of heightened ceremonial significance. Several military personnel glanced his way occasionally, some noting his respectful attention and appropriate responses, but attributing them to basic courtesy rather than any deeper understanding of military protocols. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes supervised the recognition process while observing crowd dynamics with professional interest. He noticed the clear division between informed military family responses and generic civilian applause patterns, though one older man in the standing section seemed unusually attuned to ceremony rhythm and significance. The observation registered briefly before administrative duties demanded his attention elsewhere. Staff Sergeant Williams coordinated crowd management during the extended recognition phase, ensuring proper sight lines for all attendees while maintaining clear separation between military families and civilian observers. His routine glance across the standing area paused momentarily on the elderly man whose posture seemed oddly familiar, though he could not identify what specific detail had caught his attention. A group of Air Force families discussed their children's achievements with detailed knowledge of advancement opportunities and career progression possibilities within different military specialties. Service opens doors that civilian life cannot provide, one father explained confidently to newer military spouses. These young people will understand leadership, discipline, and sacrifice in ways their civilian peers never will. The values become generational. The individual recognition phase highlighted the clear social stratification based on military understanding and family heritage. Franklin's position in the standing area marked him as an appreciative outsider whose presence was tolerated during this celebration of military achievement and tradition. Around him, conversations and reactions revealed layers of insider knowledge that excluded civilian participation beyond polite observation. Captain Torres made final adjustments to standing area positioning as the recognition ceremony approached its conclusion. "Sir," he addressed Franklin with routine courtesy, "thank you for your patience during the extended proceedings. Military ceremonies can be lengthy for those unfamiliar with our traditions, but your respectful attention is appreciated." His assumption that Franklin was simply enduring unfamiliar protocol rather than understanding its significance remained unchallenged. The recognition phase concluded with clear reinforcement of military culture superiority and family heritage importance. Franklin had observed his grandson's achievements while relegated to the position of grateful civilian attendee, his true background remaining hidden beneath assumptions about his lack of military understanding. The ceremony prepared to move toward its final phases with social hierarchy firmly established through both seating arrangements and conversational exclusion patterns. The ceremony transitioned into the traditional military demonstration phase, with active duty personnel showcasing various skills and equipment for the assembled families. Franklin observed from his wall position as Marines demonstrated close-quarters combat techniques, his weathered eyes tracking movements with an intensity that seemed oddly focused for someone presumably unfamiliar with military training methodologies and tactical applications. Major Santos coordinated the demonstration setup while addressing the civilian attendees with educational patience. "These displays showcase the advanced training your graduates have received," she explained to the standing section. "Military combat skills require years of development and cannot be understood without direct experience. Please observe respectfully while our professionals demonstrate capabilities your family members are learning to master." A weapons demonstration began as Marines displayed rifle handling and marksmanship techniques on a portable range setup within the gymnasium. The demonstrating sergeant explained basic firearms safety principles to the civilian audience, his instructional tone assuming complete unfamiliarity with weapon systems. "Safety is paramount in all military operations," he declared, his words directed primarily toward the non-military attendees who might lack appreciation for proper protocols. Franklin watched the marksmanship demonstration with quiet attention, his posture shifting almost imperceptibly as the Marines set up targets at progressively longer distances. The demonstrating soldier explained how military precision shooting differed from recreational hunting or civilian sports shooting, emphasizing the advanced training required for combat effectiveness. Around Franklin, civilian attendees nodded politely while clearly lacking comprehension of the technical complexities involved. Two Navy officers discussed the demonstration quality with professional appreciation near the standing area. "These young Marines show excellent fundamental techniques," one commented to his colleague. "Military marksmanship training produces capabilities far beyond civilian shooting sports. The disciplined approach and stress management required cannot be developed outside military environment." Their conversation carried the assumption that civilian observers lacked frame of reference for such skilled performance. The demonstration sergeant called for volunteers from military families to attempt a basic shooting challenge using modified training equipment. Several active duty fathers and retired officers stepped forward confidently, while civilian attendees remained in their designated positions, apparently understanding their exclusion from activities requiring military expertise. The clear division reinforced social hierarchy based on service experience and tactical knowledge. Captain Torres supervised crowd positioning during the demonstration, ensuring civilian observers maintained appropriate distance from military activities. "Sir," he addressed Franklin specifically, "please step back another few feet for safety protocols. These demonstrations require secure perimeters that civilians might not recognize instinctively." His guidance assumed Franklin lacked understanding of basic military safety procedures and weapon handling precautions. A retired Marine colonel participated in the volunteer shooting challenge, his performance drawing appreciative comments from military personnel throughout the gymnasium. "Muscle memory never fades when you've been properly trained," he announced after achieving respectable accuracy scores. "Military shooting skills become permanent parts of your character." He gestured dismissively toward the civilian section. "Some capabilities cannot be learned later in life or understood without direct service experience." Franklin observed the shooting demonstration with increasingly focused attention, his weathered hands unconsciously mimicking proper grip positioning while military families celebrated their volunteers' performances. The demonstrating Marines explained advanced techniques for long-range precision shooting, describing environmental factors and ballistic calculations that seemed to resonate with his concentrated observation despite his presumed civilian background. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes supervised the demonstration logistics while noting audience engagement levels throughout the gymnasium. Military families displayed obvious appreciation for technical skill demonstrations, while civilian attendees watched with polite but uncomprehending attention. One elderly man in the standing section seemed unusually absorbed by the marksmanship display, though Hayes attributed this to natural curiosity rather than any deeper understanding. The demonstration concluded with Marines achieving impressive accuracy at extended ranges, their performance drawing enthusiastic applause from military families who understood the skill level required for such precision. Civilian observers clapped politely, but without the discriminating appreciation shown by those with service backgrounds. The clear knowledge gap reinforced assumptions about who could truly appreciate military expertise and training excellence. Master Sergeant Rodriguez began equipment breakdown while sharing technical information with interested military personnel. "These weapon systems represent generations of military development and refinement," he explained to the gathering service members. "Proper utilization requires training that civilian experience cannot provide." The precision shooting capabilities demonstrated today reflect years of professional military education and cannot be replicated through casual exposure. A group of Army families discussed the demonstration's educational value with detailed knowledge of various weapon systems and training protocols. "Our children learn these skills as part of comprehensive military development," one father explained authoritatively. "Discipline, precision, and tactical thinking become integrated parts of their character through proper service training. Civilian education simply cannot provide this foundation for excellence." The demonstration phase reinforced clear distinctions between military competence and civilian observation, while Franklin maintained his quiet position against the wall. His focused attention during shooting displays had gone largely unnoticed among military personnel, who assumed his interest reflected nothing more than grandfather curiosity about his grandson's training environment rather than any personal expertise or background knowledge. Staff Sergeant Williams supervised final demonstration cleanup while observing crowd dispersal patterns. Military families engaged in continued technical discussions about weapons capabilities and training methodologies, while civilian attendees waited patiently for guidance about proper ceremony continuation. The social divide remained clearly defined through both knowledge levels and participation opportunities throughout the extended demonstration phase. The weapons demonstration concluded with military families showing obvious appreciation for advanced skill levels, while civilian observers remained excluded from meaningful participation. Franklin's intense focus during shooting displays had registered only as polite grandparent interest rather than the concentrated attention of someone with deep personal understanding of precision marksmanship principles and combat shooting methodologies. The ceremony moved into its most prestigious phase as distinguished guests were introduced to address the graduating class and assembled families. Franklin remained positioned against the wall as a three-star general approached the podium, his chest displaying ribbons that represented decades of combat leadership and strategic command responsibility. Military families straightened with obvious reverence, while civilian attendees simply waited for instructions about appropriate behavior. General Morrison began his address with words that resonated powerfully among military personnel throughout the gymnasium. "Today we witness the continuation of America's warrior tradition," he declared with commanding authority. "These graduates join ranks forged by generations who understood that freedom requires guardians willing to face dangers civilians cannot imagine." His penetrating gaze swept across military families with obvious approval before moving dismissively past the civilian section. A Medal of Honor recipient was introduced as the ceremony's keynote speaker, his presence creating immediate silence throughout the gymnasium as military personnel recognized the significance of his decorations. Colonel Retired James Whitmore stepped to the podium with the bearing of someone who had faced combat challenges beyond civilian comprehension, his words directed primarily toward those who could appreciate the sacrifices he represented. Franklin listened to Colonel Whitmore's address with focused attention that seemed oddly intense for someone presumably hearing military combat stories for the first time. The speaker described battlefield leadership under impossible conditions, tactical decisions that saved lives, and the brotherhood forged through shared danger. Around Franklin, civilian attendees appeared moved but clearly lacked the contextual understanding that created deeper resonance among military families. Two brigadier generals engaged in quiet conversation near the standing area, their discussion revealing layers of operational experience and strategic knowledge. "Combat leadership cannot be taught through books or simulations," one explained to his colleague with obvious conviction. "Real warriors emerge through fire, not training exercises." Their authoritative words carried implicit dismissal of civilian attempts to understand military realities through second-hand observation rather than direct experience. Major Santos approached the civilian standing area with additional crowd management instructions during the distinguished speaker presentations. "Please maintain absolute silence during these addresses," she directed with firm politeness toward the displaced attendees. These speakers represent the highest levels of military achievement and deserve respectful attention from all observers, regardless of their familiarity with service traditions and combat history. Colonel Whitmore described specific combat operations where split-second decisions determine mission success and soldier survival, his detailed accounts creating visible emotional responses among military families who understood the weight of such leadership responsibilities. Franklin's weathered face remained composed, but his eyes reflected a depth of attention that suggested something beyond polite civilian interest in unfamiliar military experiences. A group of special operations families discussed the speaker's background with detailed knowledge of unit histories and operational classifications. "Few people understand what real combat leadership requires," one Navy SEAL father explained to newer military spouses. "The decisions these men made under fire separate true warriors from those who think they understand military service." His dismissive glance toward civilian attendees suggested they fell into the latter category. The keynote address continued with descriptions of tactical innovations and battlefield adaptations that had influenced modern military doctrine, technical details that clearly resonated with active duty personnel, while leaving civilian observers struggling to comprehend the strategic significance. Franklin maintained his respectful position but displayed an unusual level of engagement with complex operational concepts that should have been foreign to civilian understanding. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes observed audience reactions during the distinguished speaker presentations, noting the clear division between informed military appreciation and polite civilian attention. One elderly man in the standing section seemed remarkably focused on technical combat details, though Hayes attributed this to natural curiosity about his grandson's chosen profession rather than any personal background in military operations. Staff Sergeant Williams coordinated security during the high-ranking speaker presentations while monitoring crowd behavior for any disruptions or inappropriate responses. Military families displayed obvious reverence for combat veteran speakers, while civilian attendees maintained respectful silence despite their apparent lack of contextual understanding. The social hierarchy remained clearly defined through both knowledge levels and emotional responses. Captain Torres supervised standing area management as the ceremony's most solemn moments unfolded with military precision and traditional reverence. "Sir," he quietly reminded Franklin during a particularly intense combat story, "these accounts can be disturbing for those unfamiliar with military realities. Please feel free to step outside if the content becomes too intense." His concerned guidance assumed civilian sensitivity to combat descriptions. The Medal of Honor recipient concluded his address with words that created visible emotional impact among military personnel throughout the gymnasium. "We serve so others can sleep safely," he declared with quiet intensity. The price of freedom remains constant across generations, paid by those willing to face dangers that most Americans will never know exist. Military families nodded with deep understanding, while civilian observers remained respectfully but obviously removed from such profound military truths. A retired Marine general approached other distinguished guests during the brief pause following the keynote address, his conversation revealing decades of operational experience and strategic planning knowledge. These young graduates inherit a legacy built through blood and sacrifice, he explained to gathering military leaders. They understand commitment levels that civilian society cannot comprehend or appreciate without direct military service experience. Franklin observed the distinguished speaker presentations with concentrated attention that went unnoticed among military personnel, who assumed his interest reflected simple grandfather pride rather than deep personal understanding of combat leadership principles. His position against the wall provided clear sight lines to the speakers whose words seemed to resonate with unexpected familiarity despite his presumed civilian background. The ceremony's most prestigious phase concluded with military families showing profound appreciation for distinguished combat veteran speakers, while civilian attendees maintained polite but clearly superficial engagement. Franklin's focused attention during complex operational discussions had registered only as respectful grandfather interest, rather than the concentrated understanding of someone with extensive personal experience in similar combat leadership situations. The ceremony entered its final distinguished recognition phase as senior military leadership prepared to honor exceptional service records and combat achievements among attending families. Franklin remained against the wall while a four-star general approached the podium carrying a leather folder containing citations for extraordinary military service spanning multiple decades of warfare and peacekeeping operations worldwide. General Patterson announced the ceremony's most prestigious moment with commanding authority that silenced every conversation throughout the gymnasium. "Today we recognize families whose military service extends beyond ordinary duty into the realm of extraordinary sacrifice and battlefield heroism," he declared. "These legacies inspire the next generation to understand that some Americans answer calls requiring ultimate commitment to mission accomplishment and brother protection." A retired Special Operations colonel was called forward to receive recognition for declassified missions that had remained classified for 30 years. His service record revealing operations in Southeast Asia during the most dangerous periods of American military engagement. Military families leaned forward with obvious reverence, while civilian attendees watched with polite attention, clearly unable to appreciate the significance of such rare battlefield recognition and operational secrecy requirements. Franklin observed the special recognition ceremony with intensified focus as military leaders described combat operations requiring exceptional skill, courage, and tactical innovation under impossible conditions. The citations mentioned sniper operations, reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines, and leadership during prolonged combat engagements that tested human endurance beyond normal military expectations and standard operational parameters. Major Santos supervised civilian positioning during the most solemn recognition moments while providing quiet guidance about appropriate behavior expectations. These honors represent the highest levels of military achievement, she whispered to the standing attendees. Please maintain absolute silence and respectful attention during descriptions of classified operations and combat heroism that required extraordinary personal sacrifice for mission success. The recognition ceremony continued with detailed accounts of battlefield innovations and tactical leadership that had influenced modern special operations doctrine, technical descriptions that resonated powerfully among military personnel, while leaving civilian observers struggling to comprehend the strategic significance and operational complexity. Franklin's weathered hands remained clasped behind his back, but his posture had subtly straightened during mentions of precision shooting and reconnaissance operations. Two special operations generals discussed the rare nature of such combat recognition with obvious professional respect near the standing area. Few warriors earned battlefield citations requiring 30-year classification periods. One explained quietly to his colleague. These operations demanded capabilities that exist only among the most elite military personnel. Their conversation carried implicit understanding that civilian observers lacked frame of reference for such extraordinary service requirements. Captain Torres monitored the standing section during particularly intense combat citations. His attention focused on ensuring civilian attendees maintained appropriate reverence, without becoming overwhelmed by descriptions of extreme battlefield conditions. Sir, he addressed Franklin with gentle concern, these accounts involve very intense combat situations. Please let me know if you need to step outside during the more detailed operational descriptions. The ceremony reached its emotional peak as General Patterson read citations describing individual acts of heroism that had saved American lives during critical combat situations, his words creating visible emotional responses among military families who understood the weight of such battlefield decisions. Franklin listened with concentrated attention that seemed remarkably focused for someone presumably hearing about unfamiliar military realities for the first time. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes supervised ceremony logistics while observing audience reactions to the most prestigious military recognition moments. Military families displayed profound emotional engagement with combat heroism citations, while civilian attendees maintained respectful but clearly detached observation. One elderly man in the standing section appeared unusually absorbed by detailed operational accounts, though Hayes assumed this reflected grandfather pride rather than personal military understanding. Staff Sergeant Williams coordinated security protocols during the high classification recognition phase, while monitoring crowd behavior for appropriate reverence levels. Military personnel throughout the gymnasium showed obvious appreciation for extraordinary service recognition, while civilian observers waited patiently for guidance about proper responses to unfamiliar military traditions and battlefield achievement categories. A group of combat veteran families discussed the rarity of such declassified recognition with detailed knowledge of special operations requirements and mission classification protocols. These citations represent service levels that most military personnel never approach, one Army Ranger father explained to other veteran families. Combat operations requiring 30-year secrecy involve capabilities developed through years of specialized training and battlefield experience. The special recognition phase highlighted operational achievements in precision marksmanship, reconnaissance leadership, and tactical innovation during extended combat deployments, descriptions that created intense interest among military families while remaining largely incomprehensible to civilian attendees. Franklin's focused attention during sniper operation citations went unnoticed among personnel who attributed his concentration to polite grandfather interest rather than professional understanding. Master Sergeant Rodriguez assisted with recognition ceremony coordination while noting the clear division between military comprehension and civilian observation during technical combat citations. The detailed operational accounts resonated powerfully with service families who understood battlefield requirements, while leaving non-military attendees respectfully but obviously excluded from deeper appreciation of such extraordinary military achievement levels. The distinguished recognition ceremony concluded with military families showing profound respect for combat heroism citations, while civilian attendees maintained appropriate reverence despite their apparent lack of contextual understanding. Franklin's intense focus during precision shooting and reconnaissance operation descriptions had registered only as respectful attention rather than the concentrated interest of someone with extensive personal experience in similar combat specialties. General Patterson announced the final recognition phase with words that would soon transform everyone's understanding of military service representation among the assembled families. These honors remind us that extraordinary military service often remains hidden among us, he declared with commanding presence. Sometimes the most distinguished warriors choose quiet civilian lives while carrying service records that humble even senior military leadership through their operational achievements and battlefield heroism. The ceremony transitioned into its final phase as senior leadership prepared for the traditional closing honors and family recognition moments. Franklin shifted his position slightly along the wall to maintain clear sight lines as distinguished guests began moving through the crowd, engaging with military families and acknowledging their service contributions. The afternoon sun streaming through gymnasium windows created shifting patterns of light that illuminated the gathering with ceremonial dignity. Commander Sarah Mitchell, a Navy SEAL officer serving as liaison for special operations families, began her systematic movement through the assembled crowd to identify and acknowledge veterans whose service records warranted special recognition. Her trained eye cataloged ribbon displays, unit pins, and service indicators among military families, while she prepared to offer appropriate professional courtesies to distinguished combat veterans in attendance. The commander approached several retired officers in the military family section, engaging them with questions about their service background and unit affiliations. "Your son follows an impressive family tradition," she commented to a former Marine colonel whose decorations included multiple combat tours. "Military excellence tends to run in bloodlines, especially among families with extensive operational experience." Her professional manner reflected genuine respect for multi-generational service commitment. Franklin observed the SEAL commander's systematic recognition process while maintaining his quiet position against the gymnasium wall, his weathered hands remaining clasped behind his back in the unconsciously military posture that had characterized his bearing throughout the ceremony. The afternoon light shifted across his flannel shirt as he adjusted his stance, the movement causing fabric to pull slightly across his left forearm. Two master sergeants coordinated final ceremony logistics while discussing the impressive military family representation throughout the gymnasium. These ceremonies showcased the generational nature of military service. One explained to his colleague with obvious professional satisfaction. Combat experience and tactical excellence passed down through families who understand what real sacrifice means. Their conversation carried the familiar assumption that such capabilities remained concentrated among recognized military bloodlines. Commander Mitchell continued her progression through military families, offering professional recognition and engaging in technical discussions about operational specialties and deployment experiences. Her systematic approach ensured appropriate acknowledgement for distinguished service while maintaining the clear social division between military families and civilian attendees who lacked such professional credentials and operational backgrounds. The gymnasium atmosphere grew more relaxed as ceremony formality decreased and family interaction opportunities increased throughout the gathering space. Military personnel engaged in animated discussions about unit histories and operational experiences, while civilian attendees waited respectfully for guidance about proper departure protocols and family reunion procedures following the extended formal recognition phases. Franklin's position along the wall provided optimal observation of both the graduating class and the family interaction patterns that had emerged during the ceremony's conclusion. His focused attention remained directed primarily toward Marcus, while military families celebrated their achievements with obvious professional understanding and shared appreciation for service tradition continuation among the next generation. Commander Mitchell approached the standing area where civilian attendees had remained positioned throughout the ceremony, her professional courtesy extending to acknowledge their patient attendance despite their obvious exclusion from meaningful military community participation. "Thank you for your respectful attention during today's ceremony." She began addressing the displaced civilian observers with practiced diplomatic politeness. The SEAL commander's systematic recognition process brought her closer to Franklin's position as she continued acknowledging veteran families and offering appropriate professional courtesies to those whose service records warranted special attention. Her trained observation skills automatically cataloged potential indicators of military background among the assembled attendees, while she maintained focus on her ceremonial responsibilities and protocol requirements. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes supervised final ceremony coordination while noting the clear social stratification that had characterized family interactions throughout the extended program. Military families displayed obvious comfort and insider knowledge during ceremonial phases, while civilian attendees remained appropriately positioned as respectful observers of traditions they could appreciate but not fully comprehend without direct service experience. Staff Sergeant Williams began crowd movement coordination as ceremony conclusion approached, ensuring proper departure flow for both military families and civilian attendees. His routine management included guidance for those unfamiliar with military facility protocols and departure procedures that required coordination to prevent congestion during the transition from formal ceremony to family reunion activities. The afternoon light continued shifting through gymnasium windows as Commander Mitchell's recognition process brought her within conversational distance of Franklin's wall position. Her professional attention remained focused on identifying distinguished veterans while offering appropriate acknowledgement for their service contributions and family military legacy continuation through their children's commitment to defense service. A group of special operations families gathered near the standing area to discuss their children's achievements and future military career possibilities with detailed knowledge of advancement opportunities within various specialized units. These graduates understand commitment levels that civilian society cannot appreciate, one father explained with obvious pride. Military families provide foundation that enables success in demanding operational environments. Commander Mitchell completed her systematic recognition of identified veterans in the military family section and began her courtesy acknowledgement of civilian attendees who had maintained respectful positions throughout the ceremony. Her professional training emphasized appropriate diplomatic engagement with all attendees while maintaining clear distinctions between military families and supportive civilian observers. The SEAL commander approached Franklin's position with practiced military courtesy, preparing to offer standard diplomatic thanks for civilian attendance and patient observation during extended military ceremony proceedings. Her professional manner reflected years of experience in maintaining proper protocol relationships between military personnel and civilian community members during official functions and ceremonial events. Franklin remained in his characteristic quiet position against the gymnasium wall as Commander Mitchell moved closer, the afternoon sunlight continuing to create shifting patterns across the assembled crowd. His flannel shirt had shifted slightly during the extended standing period, revealing just another inch of dark ink beneath the fabric as the SEAL commander prepared to engage him in routine civilian courtesy acknowledgement. Commander Mitchell approached Franklin with professional courtesy. Her practiced diplomatic smile prepared to offer standard appreciation for civilian attendance at military ceremonies. Sir, she began with polite formality. Thank you for your patient attention during today's proceedings. Military ceremonies can be lengthy for those unfamiliar with our traditions, but your respectful presence means a great deal to our graduating Marines and their families. Franklin nodded quietly in acknowledgement, his weathered face maintaining the humble expression that had characterized his demeanor throughout the ceremony. The movement caused his flannel shirt sleeve to shift further up his forearm, revealing additional dark ink that had remained hidden beneath the fabric during his hours of standing against the gymnasium wall. The afternoon sunlight streaming through windows illuminated the partial image with sudden clarity. Commander Mitchell's trained, I caught the edge of what appeared to be military insignia tattooed on Franklin's exposed forearm. The professional recognition skills developed through years of special operations service automatically, focusing on details that civilian observers would miss entirely. Her diplomatic smile faltered slightly as she processed visual information that contradicted every assumption made about the quiet elderly man throughout the ceremony. The partial tattoo visible beneath Franklin's shifted sleeve revealed what appeared to be specialized military unit designations and operational symbols that Commander Mitchell recognized from her extensive special operations background. Her professional training had taught her to identify such markings among fellow service members, but the implications of seeing them on someone dismissed as a civilian grandfather created immediate cognitive dissonance. Sir, Commander Mitchell said with subtle uncertainty creeping into her previously confident tone, I notice you have what appears to be military ink. Her professional curiosity overrode diplomatic protocol as she struggled to reconcile the humble civilian appearance with military tattoo evidence that suggested something far more significant than anyone had recognized during the extended ceremony proceedings. Franklin's response carried quiet dignity, without elaboration or explanation. Yes, ma'am, he replied simply, his weathered voice betraying no inclination to provide additional details or correct the assumptions that had characterized his treatment throughout the day. The brief acknowledgement confirmed Commander Mitchell's visual assessment, while offering no clarification about the nature or significance of his apparent military background. The SEAL commander's professional instincts engaged fully as she processed the disconnect between Franklin's dismissed civilian status and the military tattoo evidence, now partially visible on his forearm. Her training in personnel assessment and threat evaluation had developed acute observation skills that civilian personnel lacked, enabling her to recognize significance that others had missed entirely. May I ask about your service, sir? Commander Mitchell inquired with growing professional respect, her tone shifting from diplomatic courtesy toward the deference typically reserved for fellow military personnel. The question carried weight that nearby civilian attendees could not understand, representing acknowledgement that someone with special operations background had identified potential military credentials among those previously dismissed as observers. Franklin's humble response maintained the same quiet dignity he had displayed throughout hours of dismissal and condescending treatment from military personnel who assumed his civilian appearance indicated lack of service background. I served, he replied without elaboration, his simple words carrying understated weight that began transforming Commander Mitchell's entire perception of the situation. The SEAL commander's professional assessment accelerated as she recognized that Franklin's understated response and military bearing, now viewed through corrective perspective, revealed someone with significant service background who had been systematically dismissed and marginalized throughout the ceremony. Her training in personnel evaluation enabled recognition of subtle indicators that civilian observers and even military personnel had missed. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes noticed Commander Mitchell's extended conversation with the elderly civilian and approached with professional curiosity about what had captured the SEAL officer's focused attention. The interaction seemed oddly intense for routine civilian courtesy acknowledgement, suggesting something significant had emerged during what should have been standard diplomatic appreciation for attendance. Commander Mitchell's body language transformed as she processed additional visual details, now visible with Franklin's shifted sleep position. The partial tattoo revealed elements that suggested specialized military service far beyond standard infantry or support roles, markings that indicated operational background requiring exceptional training and combat experience that contradicted every assumption made about his qualifications. "Sir," the commander said with rapidly increasing respect, "would you be willing to show me your complete unit designation?" Her professional request carried implications that nearby personnel began noticing. The SEAL officer's obvious deference towards someone previously dismissed as civilian grandfather, creating confusion among those who had assumed his lack of military credentials throughout the ceremony. Franklin's quiet response maintained characteristic humility while acknowledging the commander's professional recognition. "If you'd like, ma'am," he replied simply, his weathered hands beginning to roll up the flannel shirt sleeve that had concealed his complete military tattoo throughout hours of dismissive treatment and condescending assumptions about his civilian status and lack of service understanding. The gymnasium atmosphere shifted subtly as Commander Mitchell's obvious professional attention toward the elderly civilian began attracting notice from nearby military personnel who had dismissed Franklin throughout the ceremony. Her body language and tone suggested recognition of something significant that contradicted the assumptions that had characterized his treatment during the extended formal proceedings and family interaction phases. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached with growing curiosity as the SEAL commander's interaction with the displaced civilian attendee continued far beyond routine courtesy acknowledgement. The extended conversation and Commander Mitchell's increasingly respectful tone suggested discovery of information that challenged the social hierarchy and assumptions that had defined Franklin's position throughout the ceremony. The moment approached when Franklin's complete military tattoo would be revealed to Commander Mitchell's trained recognition capabilities, transforming understanding of who had been standing quietly against the gymnasium wall throughout hours of dismissive treatment from military personnel who assumed his lack of credentials based entirely on civilian appearance and humble demeanor rather than actual service background. Franklin slowly rolled up his flannel shirt sleeve, revealing the complete military tattoo that had remained hidden throughout hours of dismissive treatment and condescending assumptions from personnel who had relegated him to civilian observer status. The dark ink emerged inch by inch, displaying intricate military insignia and unit designations that carried profound significance within special operations communities. Commander Mitchell's eyes widened as the full tattoo came into view, her professional recognition capabilities immediately identifying symbols that represented some of the most elite military units in American history. The detailed artwork displayed Navy SEAL, Trident insignia, Army Special Forces unit patches, and operational designations that indicated service during the most dangerous periods of modern warfare and classified mission participation. The SEAL commander's breath caught audibly as she processed the complete visual information now displayed on Franklin's weathered forearm. "Sir," she said with profound respect, replacing her previous casual tone, "you're a SEAL." The statement carried weight that nearby personnel began noticing, her obvious deference creating confusion among those who had assumed Franklin's civilian status throughout the ceremony. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes approached with growing curiosity as Commander Mitchell's body language suggested discovery of something extraordinary among the civilian attendees. The SEAL officer's obvious reverence toward the elderly man contradicted every assumption that had characterized his treatment during the extended ceremony, creating cognitive dissonance among military personnel who had dismissed his qualifications. The tattoo revealed additional details that Commander Mitchell recognized as indicators of extended combat deployments and specialized mission participation during classified operations spanning multiple decades of warfare. Vietnam-era unit designations mixed with later conflict symbols creating a service record timeline that represented continuous combat leadership through America's most challenging military engagements. Master Sergeant Rodriguez joined the growing group of personnel drawn by Commander Mitchell's unprecedented display of professional deference towards someone they had assumed lacked military credentials. "Sir," the SEAL commander continued with increasing respect, "your tattoo indicates service with units that most military personnel never encounter." Her acknowledgement began transforming the social dynamics that had characterized Franklin's marginalization. Franklin's humble response maintained characteristic understatement despite the obvious significance of his revealed service background. "I did my job," he replied quietly, his weathered voice carrying no inclination toward elaboration or correction of the assumptions that had resulted in hours of condescending treatment from personnel who had judged him based entirely on civilian appearance. The complete tattoo displayed operational symbols that Commander Mitchell recognized as representing participation in missions requiring extraordinary tactical skills and combat leadership capabilities. The intricate details included sniper designations, reconnaissance unit patches, and classified operation indicators that suggested service levels achieved by only the most elite military personnel during extended combat careers. Staff Sergeant Williams approached the gathering group with obvious confusion about the sudden attention focused on the civilian grandfather who had stood quietly against the wall throughout the ceremony. The SEAL commander's obvious respect and professional deference contradicted everything Williams had assumed about Franklin's background and qualifications during routine crowd management activities. Commander Mitchell's professional assessment continued as she identified additional tattoo elements that indicated leadership positions within special operations units during multiple combat deployments. "Sir," she said with growing reverence, "these designations represent service that most military personnel can only imagine." Her acknowledgement created visible impact among gathering personnel who had dismissed Franklin's capabilities. The gymnasium atmosphere shifted dramatically as word spread among nearby military families that the quiet civilian grandfather possessed military credentials that surpassed most active duty personnel in operational experience and combat achievement. The social hierarchy that had characterized ceremony interactions began crumbling as assumptions proved fundamentally incorrect about Franklin's background and service qualifications. Captain Torres approached with obvious bewilderment as the crowd gathering around Franklin grew larger and more respectful. The same man he had instructed about crowd positioning and safety protocols now commanded obvious reverence from a SEAL commander whose professional assessment indicated service background of extraordinary significance and operational achievement. The detailed tattoo artwork revealed unit designations that Commander Mitchell recognized as representing participation in classified operations that remained restricted information decades after completion. "Sir," she continued with profound respect, "your service record represents operations that influenced modern Special Forces doctrine." Her acknowledgement carried implications that surrounding personnel struggled to process given their previous assumptions. Franklin's quiet dignity remained unchanged despite the dramatic shift in recognition and treatment from military personnel who had dismissed him throughout the ceremony. The tattoo revelation had transformed their understanding, but his humble demeanor suggested someone comfortable with anonymity rather than seeking acknowledgement for extraordinary service achievements and combat leadership experience. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes processed the implications of Franklin's revealed credentials while recalling his dismissive treatment throughout the ceremony. The quiet civilian grandfather possessed military background that exceeded most active duty personnel in operational experience, tactical expertise, and combat achievement levels that warranted profound professional respect rather than condescending crowd management instructions. Master Sergeant Rodriguez struggled with cognitive dissonance as he recognized that Franklin's service credentials, now partially revealed through Commander Mitchell's professional assessment, represented military achievement levels that demanded respect rather than the dismissive treatment he had received during crowd positioning and protocol guidance throughout the extended ceremony proceedings. The gathering crowd of military personnel reflected growing understanding that their assumptions about Franklin's qualifications had been fundamentally incorrect. The quiet man they had relegated to civilian observer status possessed service background that commanded respect from the most elite military personnel, creating profound embarrassment about their condescending treatment and dismissive assumptions throughout the ceremony. The gathering crowd of military personnel continued expanding as word spread throughout the gymnasium that the quiet civilian grandfather possessed service credentials that surpassed most active duty experience in operational achievement and combat leadership. Commander Mitchell remained positioned closest to Franklin, her professional assessment continuing as she identified additional tattoo elements representing classified mission participation and specialized tactical roles. General Patterson approached the growing assembly with obvious curiosity about what had captured such intense attention from elite military personnel. The four-star general's presence immediately commanded additional respect as he observed the SEAL commander's unprecedented deference towards someone who had been dismissed as civilian throughout the ceremony proceedings and relegated to standing area positioning. Sir, Commander Mitchell addressed the general with formal protocol while gesturing toward Franklin's revealed tattoo. This gentleman's service record indicates participation in operations that influenced modern special forces doctrine development. Her professional assessment carried implications that created visible impact among gathering personnel who had assumed Franklin's lack of military credentials throughout the extended ceremony. General Patterson's experienced eye focused on the detailed tattoo artwork now fully visible on Franklin's forearm, his professional recognition capabilities immediately identifying symbols that represented some of the most classified and dangerous military operations in recent American history. The intricate designations revealed service levels that commanded respect from the highest military leadership rather than dismissive crowd management. The general's demeanor transformed as he processed the complete visual information displayed in Franklin's military tattoo. "Sir," he said with profound respect that silenced nearby conversations, "your service record represents operational achievements that most military careers never approach." His acknowledgement created immediate recognition among surrounding personnel that their assumptions had been catastrophically incorrect about Franklin's background. A circle of military families had formed around the recognition scene, their previous conversations about generational service excellence and military heritage superiority suddenly seeming inappropriate given Franklin's revealed credentials. The woman who had dismissed civilian understanding of military sacrifice stood speechless as she processed that the quiet grandfather possessed service background exceeding her family's accomplishments. Colonel Hendricks joined the gathering with obvious bewilderment as she observed senior military leadership showing unprecedented respect towards someone she had dismissed as civilian throughout ceremony coordination activities. The social hierarchy that had governed seating arrangements and family interaction protocols appeared fundamentally flawed given Franklin's extraordinary service background now commanding attention from elite personnel. Franklin maintained his characteristic quiet dignity despite the dramatic shift in recognition and treatment from military personnel who had condescended to explain basic protocols and safety procedures throughout the ceremony. His humble demeanor suggested someone comfortable with anonymity rather than seeking acknowledgement for service achievements that clearly surpassed most active duty experience levels. The retired Marine colonel who had volunteered for shooting demonstrations approached with visible embarrassment as he recognized that his boastful performance had occurred in the presence of someone whose marksmanship credentials likely exceeded his own capabilities by significant margins. The tactical expertise required for Franklin's indicated service specialties included precision shooting skills developed through actual combat rather than peacetime training. Marcus Kowalski observed from his formation position as senior military leadership gathered around his grandfather with obvious reverence and professional respect. The young Marine struggled to process that the quiet man he had assumed lacked military background possessed service credentials that commanded attention from the most elite personnel at his graduation ceremony. transforming his understanding of family heritage. Major Santos approached the gathering with profound embarrassment about her dismissive treatment and crowd management instructions directed towards someone whose service record warranted positions of honor rather than relegation to civilian standing areas. Her professional protocol training had failed to identify military credentials that should have earned immediate recognition and appropriate ceremonial positioning. The gymnasium atmosphere had transformed completely as military families processed the implications of Franklin's revealed service background. Conversations about military excellence and generational service superiority seemed hollow given that the most distinguished veteran present had been dismissed and marginalized throughout the ceremony based on appearance assumptions rather than actual credentials. Staff Sergeant Williams joined the gathering with obvious discomfort about his patronizing explanations of basic military customs to someone whose operational experience exceeded his own by decades of combat leadership and specialized mission participation. The safety protocols and facility guidance he had provided represented fundamental knowledge that Franklin possessed far beyond civilian understanding levels. General Patterson continued his professional assessment of Franklin's tattoo details, while other senior officers gathered to acknowledge service achievements they had previously failed to recognize. "Sir," the general said with increasing respect, "your operational background represents service that shaped modern military doctrine." His acknowledgement carried weight that created profound impact among personnel who had assumed Franklin's civilian status. The recognition scene had attracted attention throughout the gymnasium as military families observed senior leadership, showing unprecedented respect toward the man they had dismissed as civilian grandfather throughout ceremony proceedings. The social dynamics that had characterized family interactions appeared fundamentally flawed, given Franklin's extraordinary service credentials now commanding attention from elite military personnel. Commander Mitchell addressed the gathering officers with professional assessment conclusions that emphasized the significance of Franklin's revealed service background. "Gentlemen," she announced to the assembly, "this man's operational history represents achievements that most special operations personnel aspire to reach." Her acknowledgement created immediate understanding that Franklin's credentials exceeded standard military experience by extraordinary margins. Captain Torres approached with visible shame about his condescending safety guidance and protocol explanations directed towards someone whose military expertise surpassed his own qualifications by significant operational experience and combat achievement levels. The crowd positioning instructions and facility management guidance have been inappropriately applied to elite military personnel deserving immediate recognition and honor. The gathering of senior military leadership around Franklin created a scene of unprecedented respect and professional acknowledgement that contradicted every assumption and dismissive treatment he had received throughout the ceremony. The quiet grandfather who had stood patiently against the wall possessed service credentials that commanded reverence from the most distinguished officers present at the graduation. General Patterson stepped forward with ceremonial authority that commanded absolute attention throughout the gymnasium as military personnel and families recognized the unprecedented nature of Franklin's service acknowledgement. "Sir," the four-star general announced with profound respect, "your operational record represents the finest traditions of American military service across multiple decades of combat leadership and specialized mission accomplishment that deserves formal recognition." The general gestured toward the honor seating section that had remained occupied by military families throughout the ceremony. "Please join us in the position that should have been yours from the beginning," he declared with obvious embarrassment about the dismissive treatment Franklin had received. "Your service credentials warrant placement among our most distinguished guests rather than standing area relegation based on incorrect civilian assumptions." Franklin's humble response maintained characteristic understatement despite the dramatic transformation in recognition and treatment from senior military leadership. "Thank you, sir, but I came to watch my grandson graduate," he replied quietly, his weathered voice carrying the same dignity that had characterized his patient endurance of condescending treatment throughout the ceremony. The pride in his eyes focused entirely on Marcus rather than personal acknowledgement. Commander Mitchell addressed the assembled military personnel with professional assessment that emphasized the significance of Franklin's revealed service background for everyone present. This gentleman's operational achievements represent service levels that most of us aspire to reach throughout our entire careers, she announced to the gathering crowd. His tactical expertise and combat leadership experience exceed standard military accomplishment by extraordinary margins that warrant our deepest respect. The ceremony concluded with General Patterson personally escorting Franklin to a position of honor among distinguished guests, the movement creating visible impact throughout the gymnasium as military families observed the dramatic reversal of social positioning. The quiet grandfather who had been dismissed as civilian now occupied the most prestigious seating while receiving obvious reverence from senior military leadership. Marcus approached his grandfather with profound emotion as he processed the complete transformation of understanding about his family heritage and military background. "Grandpa," he said with obvious pride and newfound respect, "why didn't you ever tell me about your service?" The young Marine struggled to reconcile years of assuming Franklin lacked military experience with the extraordinary credentials now commanding attention from elite personnel. Franklin's response reflected the humility that had characterized his patient endurance of dismissive treatment throughout the ceremony. "Son," he replied with gentle warmth, "I serve so you could have the freedom to choose your own path. Your decision to serve honors our family more than any old stories about my time in uniform." His words carried profound meaning that resonated throughout the gathering military families. The military personnel who had provided condescending guidance and dismissive treatment approached Franklin individually to offer personal apologies for their inappropriate assumptions and protocol explanations. Major Santos, Captain Torres, Staff Sergeant Williams, and others acknowledged their mistakes with obvious embarrassment about failing to recognize extraordinary service credentials deserving immediate honor and respect. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment, or tell us about a veteran in your family whose service deserves recognition. General Patterson addressed the entire gymnasium assembly with words that transformed the ceremony's conclusion into a lesson about assumptions and hidden service among civilian communities. Today we learned that extraordinary military achievement often walks quietly among us, he declared with commanding authority. The most distinguished warriors frequently choose humble civilian lives while carrying service records that humble even senior military leadership through their operational accomplishments. The recognition transformation had profound impact on military families who had boasted about generational service excellence while dismissing Franklin's assumed civilian status. The woman who had claimed military understanding ran in bloodlines approached with obvious shame to acknowledge her inappropriate assumptions and request forgiveness for dismissive comments about civilian comprehension of military sacrifice. Commander Mitchell coordinated with ceremony staff to ensure Franklin received appropriate documentation of his attendance and recognition at his grandson's graduation. Her professional attention focused on correcting the systematic oversights that had resulted in dismissive treatment of elite military personnel. The SEAL commander's assessment had prevented complete ceremonial failure in acknowledging distinguished service representation. The gymnasium atmosphere reflected complete transformation from the social hierarchy that had characterized family interactions throughout the ceremony. Franklin's revealed credentials had demonstrated that military excellence and tactical expertise existed beyond recognized channels, challenging assumptions about who deserved respect and honor within military community gatherings and ceremonial functions. Marcus stood beside his grandfather during the ceremony's actual conclusion, his understanding of family heritage completely transformed through recognition of Franklin's extraordinary service background. The young Marine's pride in his graduation achievement now included profound respect for generational military excellence that had remained hidden through humble civilian presentation rather than boastful display. The military families departed with lasting lessons about assumptions and hidden service among those they had dismissed as civilian observers throughout the ceremony. Franklin's quiet dignity and extraordinary credentials had challenged their understanding of who possessed military expertise and deserved recognition within their community, creating profound impact on future interactions with civilian attendees. General Patterson offered final words that emphasized the ceremony's unexpected lesson about recognizing service regardless of presentation or assumption. The finest warriors often choose quiet paths after extraordinary service, he declared to the departing families. Today reminded us that respect should be earned through recognition rather than assumptions about appearance or social positioning during military gatherings. Franklin departed the ceremony with Marcus. Their conversation focused on family heritage and military tradition continuation rather than the recognition that had transformed his treatment from dismissive civilian management to profound military respect. His humble acceptance of both dismissal and honor reflected character forged through decades of elite service and combat leadership that required no external validation for personal satisfaction. The graduation ceremony concluded with lasting impact on all attendees who witnessed the dramatic transformation from assumption to recognition, challenging their understanding of hidden service among civilian communities and the importance of respect over social hierarchy in military cultural interactions.